Okay, what's good, everyone? It's Nigel here, Trinidad Empowerment Networks. Tonight, I want to bring you one of the most explosive analysis I've seen coming from one of the most respected American journalists covering the Caribbean, a man called Tim Padgett. Tim Padgett. He's an American editor at WLRN, and he is a PBS affiliate. So Padgett isn't just, for me, another commentator. He's a veteran foreign affairs correspondent who's written for the likes of Time Magazine, The Washington Post, and CNN. He covers major political and humanitarian crises across Latin America. So when Tim Padgett speaks, especially on regional affairs, Washington listens. Washington listens. So this week, Padgett warned that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, may have crossed a dangerous legal line, one that could place her government in the crosshairs of the International Criminal Court. See, no one's talking about this at the minute. This is dangerous.
Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister should be applauded for steering away from Venezuela's Maduro, but questioned for steering into Trump's potential legal whirlpool. Hi, I'm Tim Padgett, WLRN's America's editor, and this is America's Decoded, my commentary on Latin America, the Caribbean, and their key relationship with the U.S. Let me know what you think. If you thought Scylla and Charybdis dwell only in the Mediterranean, think again. They lurk just as hazardously in the Caribbean, only here they're called Maduro and Trump. And Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister thinks she can navigate between the two of them. In Greek mythology, Scylla and Charybdis are the sea monsters who menace the narrow Strait of Messina that separates Italy and Sicily. They define dilemma. If you sail away from being devoured by Scylla, you get swallowed by Charybdis, and vice versa. Right now, Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro and U.S. President Donald Trump stalk the equally tight Columbus Channel between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, a stretch also known as the Serpent's Mouth. It would appear Trinidadian Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar has made the right choice by turning her back on the six-headed Scylla that Maduro represents. Too many Caribbean leaders have shamelessly apologized for Maduro's brutal and disastrous regime, either because they sympathize with its left-wing anti-U.S. mission or because it once lavished oil aid on their countries. But Persad-Bissessar has had the backbone to call Venezuela's socialist revolution what it is, a repressive mafia whose criminal scourges have leached into her violent crime-plagued island nation. So Trinidad and Tobago is letting U.S. warships dock and conduct joint military exercises there as they target alleged narco boats from Venezuela and possibly Maduro's regime itself. In response, Maduro has declared Persad-Bissessar persona non grata. Yet, by admirably steering away from Maduro's Scylla, she may find herself trapped in the whirlpool of Charybdis, President Trump. That is, the serious legal issues that he and she, if only by association, may have to answer for. When Trump ordered the first deadly strike on a boat moving into the Caribbean in September, Persad-Bissessar gave her full-throated approval. Drug traffickers should be killed violently, she said. Her frustration is understandable. But just about every expert will tell you the U.S. has shattered a global norm that demands civilian criminals be subject to law enforcement, not military execution, even if the Trump administration labels them as narco-terrorist combatants. What's more, oftentimes those Venezuelan drug boats carry innocents, such as migrants and women who are being sex trafficked. When Navy Admiral Alvin Halsey recently retired as head of the U.S. military Southern Command here in Doral, he was said to have been very uncomfortable with the potential liability that came from overseeing Trump's Caribbean campaign. And that's the Charybdis come Trump vortex Persad-Bissessar herself risks being sucked into if she hasn't been already. Such is life in the serpent's mouth.
So according to Padgett, by backing the U.S. military operations against alleged Venezuelan narco-terrorists, the Prime Minister skipped due process, she skipped court trials, and the Prime Minister may be seen as endorsing extrajudicial killings. He cited her alleged remark, especially when she said they should be killed violently. He cited those remarks. So, by the way, Padgett did praise the Prime Minister for distancing herself from the Maduro regime and for opening local ports to the US warships. But he issued a chilling warning that kind of support may violate international human rights laws. So even Admiral Halsey, who once led the US Southern Command, reportedly resigned over fear that such missions could expose him to war crimes liability. So the question becomes, if a US admiral is cautious, what does that mean for a Caribbean prime minister giving support to the same operation he resigned over? Now, legally speaking, Padgett has a point. Now, former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte was arrested by the ICC earlier this year for crimes against humanity tied to extrajudicial killings, and he faces up to 27 years in prison. The precedent is there. The risk is real. No one's talking about this. And here's where I slightly disagree with Padgett's framing. Here is where I take a slight disagreement with his framing. He applauds the Prime Minister for distancing herself from Maduro. But let's be practical. How do you distance yourself from a government you depend on for gas to a large extent? Trinidad's Dragon's gas field, or the project, can only move forward through cooperation with Venezuela. The Manakin field already operates jointly with Venezuela, so we can't exactly have our cake and eat it. Aligning with the US military whilst trying to negotiate economically with Caracas is simply not going to work. So this is why I take slight disagreement with him. This is why I take slight disagreement with Tim Padgett. Now, here's the deeper issue here. Padgett's tone, whilst informed, still carries that American bias, in my opinion, that lingering sense of US entitlement that says if Washington calls someone a dictator, the rest of the hemisphere must follow suit. But let's not forget, the same Donald Trump administration condemning Maduro still insists its own 2020 election was stolen. So who's really setting the standards for democracy here? Donald Trump still claims the election in 2020 was stolen. So this isn't about defending Maduro. It's about calling out the hypocrisy. You can't label others as criminal for refusing to bow to Washington whilst conducting targeted assassination without trial in the name of freedom or narco-terrorism or whatever excuses they decide to run this time. It's hypocrisy. So let's digress. The local cost when politics hits the waterfront is substantial. What happens to our fishing villages, our shipping routes, our coastal tourism when the Caribbean suddenly becomes a military zone? Now that's another question that nobody's asking and nobody's speaking about, and we must, as we do here on 10. Right now, the United States claims it's carrying out strikes on vessels near Venezuela. They call them anti-drugs operation. But these actions are happening in international waters, as we know, dangerously close to Trinidad and Tobago. Warships are patrolling the same seas or the same sea lanes our fishermen use every day. So let's start with fishing. Our southwestern communities, from Icarcus to Cedros, they depend on calm seas and reliable access to fishing grounds. So when military vessels enter these zones, fishermen either stay home or they run away in fear or the risk of being mistaken for hostile actors. That's not good. That's not good for you. That's not good for the markets. That's not good for prices. It's terrible for Trinidad and Tobago. Next is the shipping and logistics. Maritime trade is Trinidad's economic backbone. Oil, gas, imports, exports. If insurance premiums spike, our shipping firms reroute to avoid naval alerts, it hit local businesses immediately. We face slower deliveries, slower supply chains, bottlenecks, people avoiding the region, avoiding using our shipping lane, and that only sends prices up. As for tourism, especially coastal tourism, that can be destroyed by perception alone. Nobody books a holiday. Nobody books a holiday where the sea is potentially a war zone. So all of this has a direct effect on Trinidad. All of this is happening now. It's going to have a direct economical effect on Trinidad. Our coastal communities, they have been ignored for far too long. They've been ignored for far too long. They don't benefit from these foreign campaigns. They do not benefit from these foreign campaigns. So this, all in all, is not great. And that's why I would say our sovereignty always matters. Allowing foreign powers to use our ports, our waters for military purposes risk turning our economic zone into a potential battlefield. We need transparency from our leaders. We need clear explanation of how this activity protects local livelihoods and what concrete safeguards exist for coastal workers. We've heard nothing but excuses and nonsense. So behind every radar blip and every naval patrol are families, as we know, asking one simple question, by the way: how long before the sea they depend on becomes too much of a danger zone? We cannot afford silence here, Trinidad. Trinidad's blue economy depends on peace, and peace depends on leadership that puts our people first. So in closing, I want to say this. The Prime Minister's comments might have earned her applause in Washington. The Prime Minister's comment may have earned her some applause in Washington. But at what cost to Trinidad and Tobago? Because if the ICC ever decides to trace the chain of command, Trinidad could find itself dragged into the same courtroom once reserved for criminals. So, my friends, this isn't just about geopolitics. It's about sovereignty, it's about accountability, and it's about the livelihoods of real people. Because when the superpowers play chess, I remind you, when they play chess, it's the small nations like ours, the ordinary citizens, who get sacrificed first. And that's the way I'd like to end tonight's podcast, tonight's video. These are the things that are not being spoken about right now. So I'm going to keep my ear to the ground and bring you the best information as I do here on Trinidad Empowerment Network. As far as I know so far, looking at Washington, there hasn't been any substantive There's been nothing substantive coming from Washington in regards to an imminent attack, though all of the information points to something happening very, very soon. But let's hope that that doesn't happen. I'm hoping and praying that this entire thing calms down very, very soon. And that's my take. Please subscribe to Trinidad Empowerment Network. Thank you to each and every single one of you. I'll try and read all of your comments, by the way. So yeah, like and subscribe. Look after each other. Take care. God bless. Peace.